So let's look now at how nitrogen is recycled throughout an ecosystem, how it cycles through the nitrogen cycle. Now, first of all, nitrogen is a key component for all living things. All living things need and require nitrogen. Nitrogen is a component of DNA, the nucleic acids in DNA, and also part of the amino acids for proteins. And if you remember looking at nucleic acid or DNA, there's a picture of a DNA strand, and nitrogen is necessary for that DNA. It is a key component. Now, nitrogen exists in the atmosphere, and about 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. But most of the nitrogen is in this form of N2 molecules. And most organisms can't break apart N2 molecules, nitrogen gas molecules. So this nitrogen cycle is needed to break that strong bond. And the nitrogen cycle is just that. It is a cycle that the nitrogen follows within an ecosystem. So it takes many different forms, goes round and round, and recycles within the ecosystem. And the first step in the nitrogen cycle is nitrogen fixation. And what nitrogen fixation is, it's a process that's carried out by bacteria found on the nodules of roots of legumes such as peas, peanuts, soybeans, etc. So these little nodules, this bacteria that's found in those nodules of these root vegetables. This can also occur in water in something called cyanobacteria, and also the process can occur in lichens. And this idea of nitrogen fixation, it occurs with this bacteria. Now, the bacteria and the plants actually have a symbiotic relationship. There's a benefit for both of the bacteria and the plants. They both benefit. What happens is the nitrogen through this bacteria is actually combined with H2, hydrogen gas, and together this gives ammonia, NH3. So it's the bacteria that can actually take this strong bond of N2 nitrogen and combine it with H2 hydrogen to give ammonia. Any of this ammonia that's in excess is actually dissolved in water, and then it becomes an ammonium ion, an NH4 ions. So it's very, very important for these plants to have both ammonia and ammonium, and it's a result of having this bacteria fix the nitrogen with hydrogen. And then we have the second step called nitrification. And what happens in nitrification? Now, this is the process where the nitrate ions are actually produced from the ammonium ions by the bacteria in the soils. So another bacteria takes over. And plants need both the ammonium, NH4, and the nitrate ions, NO3, to grow. So it's this bacteria that does this process. And then once these plants take in the ammonium and nitrates, they use those to make amino acids, their own building blocks, and their own DNA. And then, as we've already looked at, once the plants have the amino acids, once they have the nitrogen, it is in the food chain. And animals get their amino acids by digesting the plant proteins and nucleic acid, and then once it's inside the animal, it can remake their own proteins and DNA. And this is the same process that occurs in humans. We get our amino acids from plants and proteins, and we have the nitrogen then in our system. Well, there's a third step, and this is called denitrification. And denitrification occurs when an organism produces waste or dies or decomposes, and the materials are then broken down. And those nitrates and ammonium ions are released. Bacteria called anaerobic, and you may have heard of this term anaerobic if you are into fitness or exercise. Anaerobic just means without oxygen. And this bacteria is able to convert the ammonium and the nitrate back to N2 gas, back to that nitrogen gas. The nitrogen is then put back into the atmosphere and the cycle can continue. Now, this anaerobic bacteria occurs in ecosystems that have low oxygen acidic environments, such as a peat bog. And we looked at a peat bog already. So this area that has low oxygen has a lot of anaerobic bacteria, and it can convert that ammonium and nitrates back into nitrogen gas. So when we look at this nitrogen cycle, we can see up here is the nitrogen gas, N2, and it cycles in an ecosystem. It may come down and go this way and follow this path and then get back into the atmosphere. It may get taken up by plants along the way, and we can follow all of these arrows and look at the nitrogen cycle. And you will see in your own data booklet a picture of the nitrogen cycle, and we're going to look at that in more detail as we explore this in class.